So, welcome to Concept Design Club. This is our third interview of the year. We have the amazing Ben Hale with us, i.e. Macon Online. He is a 2D/3D artist currently working at ILM X Lab right now. And he has graced us with his presence of being interviewed by us and answering our question. So let's give him a round of applause. Okay, and to get things started, you can hear us, right? Correct?
Yeah, I can.
Awesome. So the first things first, can you give us a little brief rundown about yourself, Ben, for the people who might not know you too well?
Let's see. I just turned 30. I'm a huge nerd. I like video games, and I have an unhealthy obsession with rocks. But I'm not a geologist. I guess to start, I started in the industry maybe 4 years ago. I started by freelancing for Airborne Studios in Berlin. Got to do a couple of skins for Overwatch and a little bit of work on Halo 5. And then after that, I worked 2 years at a little company called The Void. They do installment virtual reality. They recently installed one at Disneyland. It's a Star Wars experience. You guys should go check it out. And that led to a connection here with ILMX Lab, and that's where I'm at. It's been kind of a short span in the industry, but I'm still kicking.
All right, that sounds like a really interesting story.
Thanks.
First question is, within your journey from starting out as an artist to now, what were some of the difficulties that you faced trying to, let's say, get your foot in the door? Because that seems to be the hardest part of being in the industry.
I think getting noticed was a huge issue. Also having a lot of confidence in my own work and constantly second-guessing myself. But I think the things that helped with that is to connect with a lot of online communities like polycount.com, for example. Being involved in that, posting your stuff online, posting it on Twitter, that really helped me in a lot of ways. It helped me not only to get my stuff out there and to get noticed, but also I get feedback, because constantly regurgitating my own feedback wasn't really helping me improve, and getting sometimes harsh criticism from other people really helped me to see different perspectives and improve. But also hearing good feedback from people. I know it's kind of a lame thing for a lot of people to hear, but when you hear good things from people like, I like this, this is looking good, it's good to have that encouragement to keep going. And not just from mom putting your picture on the fridge. It's good to hear it from people that you work with, people that you admire, people that you look up to. And that helps you to realize I'm going in the right direction. I don't know if that answered your question. I kind of went off on a tangent there, but...
Oh, no, that's good. That just shows how difficult it was.
Yeah, but ultimately, I think it was just not having a whole lot of exposure, not really being out there, not getting a lot of feedback, and not really knowing what in the heck artists do in the industry for quite a while. On the outside looking in, you think, oh, well, he's a concept artist. He spends all of his time just drawing awesome stuff. But you don't really ever realize that about half of their job is research and gathering references and filling out like sheets of and graphs of like feedback and everything. I just never really had a good concept of that. But again, that's a really good reason why it's good to go out there and to talk to people and to who are currently in the industry and see what they do. Well, that's exactly what you guys are doing.
Great. Glad we have one foot already taking one good step. And along with the positive encouragement needed, would you also say the rougher side of love is also needed as well? Do you feel like people just need like that punch to really let them know what they need to work on?
Yeah, I realize that a lot of us have a lot of emotional attachment to our work, and that's normal. That's okay. But I think it's important to know that our art is not like our baby. We we can throw our work out and start again, because what makes you you is you. Your work is just a thing. You can always start over. You can always do better. You can always improve. And when you get feedback and you consider it, and it's important that you understand the difference between feedback and somebody just being a dick. And you consider it, it gives you more perspective. It helps you to consider things that you've never really thought of before. And yeah, it's tough love. It's important though. And it's also important for us to not have such an incredibly strong emotional attachment to our work that it makes us defensive and unteachable.
Awesome. Thanks for that awesome answer. And bouncing up from what you said before, how many people don't really know much of concept art. How would you, if you could give your own definition on what concept art is and truly shed light on this very popular yet still oddly mysterious field that everybody wants to get into, what would it be?
It's different depending on the industry you're getting into. It's different depending on the company that you work for. In some cases, concept artists, for example, if you take Claire Hummel's work, she's an art director. She solves a lot of technical problems with her concept art in figuring out how things need to look in the shader, but she does paintings. Other people just do really, really high concept work. They just throw out the craziest ideas and expect the 3D artist to grab and choose and interpret, and they don't really spell anything out for those artists. It's really different. It's very nebulous, but overall concept art is just exploring ideas, throwing wet spaghetti at the fridge and seeing what sticks. And there is no final destination in concept art. Doing 100 iterations versus 10 is not necessarily going to give you better results, especially if you're putting good planning and an important thought into your designs. Concept art is just trying to get a better design, but there's no destination. There's no place that you'll ever arrive at, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And would you say that actually getting out those ideas and trying to basically illustrate what the idea is a lot more important than a final finished render of whatever it is?
I think it's an important step, if that makes sense. The final finished render is what a lot of people see when they think of concept art, but a final finished render is not concept art, it's promotional art. Concept art is just trying to take this idea, make it more concrete, give it better form, and communicate these ideas to people later on down the industry or in the pipeline that need it. For example, if you're a concept artist and you're working with a character art team, you need to solve problems because you will have an easier time solving those problems in 2D than they can in 3D. So your job is to solve most of those problems before the 3D artists get to it, if that makes any sense. Or if it's like for 2D animated film, solve as many problems as you can so that the animators won't have such a horrible time making this character move.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you. That really sheds a lot of light, because it's something that's really not well defined no matter where you go, and you get many different definitions when you look it up online. And of course, if you go on ArtStation, you see many different things. So thank you for that. And which that leads me to my next question. Your current job at ILM X Lab, you're an environment artist, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. But I'm an environment 3D artist, not a concept artist.
Oh.
So I for a while, while I was working at Airborne, I was able to do a lot of concept art, but at ILMX Lab, I just do a lot of 3D environment art, and I get to see a lot of concept coming in and interpret that and model it. And there's a lot of back and forth between environment artists, like the 3D artists and the concept artists. And that's one important thing, and kind of a refreshing thing to hear, is that you're always going to have back and forth. You're always going to get closer and closer, and a lot of communication between departments. But yeah, sorry, I didn't let you finish your question.
No, that's
Sorry.
totally fine. The question was, well, that actually helps me clarify the question. What was a typical day in the life at Airborne Studios when you were working as a concept artist? And what's a day in the life here at ILMX Lab where you're working as a 3D artist? Because lots of people here also want to get into 3D as well.
Nice. So, day in the life as a 2D artist at Airborne was me staying up until 5 a.m. because they're a German company in Berlin. And I was freelancing for them via the internet. And it's just every night me progressively destroying my sleep schedule and it taking its toll on my health. But that's the negative aspect. By the way, guys, please, please, please get enough sleep. It will come back to bite you. But overall, it was just a lot of back and forth with the studio head, who would forward a lot of our artwork to the client. The client would give us feedback, corrections, and I would just work on it. And it's a lot slower pace than I initially expected. Mostly because they usually have a pretty good idea of what they want. A lot of clients will already have style guides. They'll have art bibles. They'll have references. And they'll have general guidelines so that every decision that you make and everything that you explore is meaningful. And you're not just doing like what that Skillful Huntsman art book does, where they just did 100 silhouette sketches of a character and accomplished basically nothing. They try to save a lot of that time to give you a starting point. And so it was just, yeah, back and forth between the client at Airborne. And when they were happy, it was a pretty easygoing day. Just move on to the next one, go through the whole process again, go through their style guide, their art prompts. At ILMX Lab, it's pretty different. We have software that helps us keep track of our tasks. We have producers that work with us to be able to help us to know where to go. We have a producer who comes around and has dailies, just looks at our work, makes sure that makes sure that we're not having any issues, and if we are, we can always redirect, try something else, and they give us feedback, let us know if we're going in the direction that they like, or if maybe that we should try something else. Basically that. It's just a whole lot of communication, a whole lot of working with other people, a lot of back and forth, and a lot of little changes. And it's actually kind of pleasant and relaxing most of the time. It's not as high-strung and stressful as maybe other companies or industries, but I have a really good time. It's my happy place.
That's great. Glad you're able to enjoy what you do because, it'd be pretty bad if you didn't.
Yeah.
But that leads me to my next question, which is what kind of projects do you personally enjoy working on?
Ooh. So, are you talking like personal projects or things that I just love whenever they come up at work?
Both.
Because I can't be too detailed at work.
Right. I don't want to
Yeah.
get you in trouble. Both ideally. Whichever just brings the most joy out of you.
This is fundamentally why I've never been able to decide if I'm a character artist or an environment artist, because I really, really love rocks. I really love architecture. I love this is gonna sound weird. There's this thing in 3D called a trim sheet. And it's basically just a modular texture cut up into a bunch of different sections, and you can use a trim of something like a nice molding, and this one's like a panel, and this one is maybe a little detail, and you can build entire buildings out of this one texture. I love that stuff. It's like a fun puzzle because you have so environment art is basically like making Lego blocks, right? You make a modular piece and you build entire levels out of it. Well, this is like a quantum Lego block. It's a smaller version. It's a component of that modular asset. And I just have an incredible amount of joy of building stuff like that. I don't know if you guys have seen the giant metal teapots that I was working on.
I have personally because I follow you on Twitter,
Okay.
but you guys can look it up. It's what's your Twitter handle again?
Uh, when I got it, it didn't let me have my original name. It is Benjamin Hale 7.
Benjamin Hale 7. Go look up his giant metal teapot. It's really cool.
But also, on the character art side, while I do like realistic characters, I have a huge love for stylized characters. And a lot of people, when they compare realistic versus stylized, I realize that the word stylized is a completely unhelpful word. Because stylized can mean anything from Minecraft to Uncharted 4. You'd be surprised to know that Uncharted is a stylized game.
Wow.
It absolutely is. It is within that. It's within that range of stylistic depiction. Like all of the textures and the materials are fairly realistic and believable, but there is a very intentional painterly aspect that goes into them. I'd say that their characters are definitely photorealistic, but their environments by no means are. But when I talk about stylized, I just basically mean taking the most important aspects of a design, like its shape or its color, solid blocks of color and contrast, and breaking it down to those simple things and then building off of that. It's a lot less about surface detail and a lot more about primary and secondary forms. And I really try to focus on that kind of stuff with my art because it's really, really easy to get lost in tertiary details. And that can really make something muddy or messy or noisy. And you get away with that in photorealistic stuff just because everything has it. And that's what the real world is like. But yeah, I love all of it. I can't really choose.
No, that's perfectly fine. That's really cool, though. Especially that tip on stylized versus realistic. And I didn't even know Uncharted 4. I never even looked at it that deeply. You typically don't see past the characters, and you see it, and you think, okay, that's just real. But that.
Yeah.
But okay, the next question would be, if you could give your top 3 pieces of advice for those looking to get their start in the industry, what would you say would be the top 3 things that a graduating art student should focus on?
Okay. First tip is if you don't get a job right out of college, it's okay. And this can be a huge point of stress. I've seen so many students struggle with this. I've seen them go through an existential crisis with high expectations that if I don't get a job right out of college right away, then I might never get one, which is false, by the way. There's this recent string of tweets on Twitter that have been really helpful of people basically going through their timeline, their artistic timeline, and what they went through. And oftentimes, most of them, some of the heaviest hitters in the industry, the most admirable people, the most accomplished, had a huge gap between college and their first real job, if that makes sense. And that's okay. Second most important bit of advice that I can give is just hang out online, get to know people, make friends, make connections. Well, make friends. Connections will come with that. And be genuine when you do it. Don't make every interaction that you have with somebody online explicitly for your own artistic progress or progress in your career. Follow artists that you admire. Show off your own art. If you're struggling with something, ask for feedback, and you'll be amazed that within months, a year, you'll have a huge following, a big spread, an amount of exposure every time you post something. And it really, really helps you to make good connections, which can lead to future jobs and lifelong friends. And the third, I would have to say, is stay humble and don't be a dick. It sounds really stupid, really benign, but really, just don't be mean to people. It's a small industry, and word gets around really fast. And you can definitely damn your own career just by shit talking about a game that you didn't like. Like, we don't really, as people in the industry, have that amount of wiggle room when it comes to having extremely aggressive, strong opinions on the internet. So just try not to. I mean, that's probably not very helpful because we're all very passionate. You know, we're all in this industry because we are passionate, but if you hate something, nobody really needs to hear it. And that I've seen a number of times where somebody specifically saying something really, really in bad taste about a game like Halo or something. And then later on they have a job opportunity that gets blocked because that stuff is found. And it's interpreted as toxicity, even if maybe it was a while ago, or maybe you didn't really feel all that angry about it, you were just using strong words. But yeah, be humble, don't be a dick. Maybe not the most useful advice there, but I found that personally it's helped to keep me out of a lot of trouble. And also for me to evaluate myself and to make sure that I'm not just being mean to people on the internet who are real people.
I find that actually more useful than anything else, really. Because I think you can go online and read 1,000 articles on go to blank place and do blank thing and have blank things in your portfolio. But those tips are the things that really matter the most that people don't often talk about. So thank you for sharing that. I think everyone here should really benefit from hearing that.
That's good. Yeah, I found that the most useful advice I've ever gotten has never really been artistic advice or technical advice on how to achieve a certain look. It's been some days you just don't feel like doing art, and that's okay. Because nobody ever talks about it. We don't really know how we're supposed to feel. And a lot of people don't always often feel like share their feelings on the internet. So we just see this picturesque landscape of perfection in everybody else's life, and meanwhile we're over here struggling to even draw 1 hour a day. And it's okay. That's normal. And I think we need to talk about that stuff more often.
I 100% agree. And I can definitely see like a huge push, at least on Twitter, because a lot of people are getting more and more vocal about these things on Twitter. A lot more of a push towards talking about these things that no one ever talks about, but everybody experiences.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and actually going off of one of your points of staying social, what social media outlets do you think would be the best for people to stick onto? Because this is something that's constantly changing, and sometimes some things are less popular than the other, or some social media outlets die, like Facebook. But what would you recommend would be the communities that we should try to go to in order to connect with people?
Well, first and foremost, Twitter has been awesome lately. I don't know if that's going to change because Twitter is also a garbage fire in a lot of ways, and I'm sure you guys know. There's a you can, by the way, you can subscribe to block lists on Twitter. They will just go through. It takes a couple days, but it will automatically block certain people that fit a, like actual neo-Nazis or that kind of thing. It'll go through and automatically block it so that your Twitter experience will be instantly elevated. But yeah, Twitter is fantastic. I really love it. I also recommend sites like ArtStation, obviously. The community aspect is a little bit tougher, but damn, do you see a lot of good art there. And it's a really great place to connect kind of more one-on-one with other artists. Mm-hmm. And polycount.com is where I grew up. They also have a huge 2D art section there as well. A great community, lots of good feedback. I grew up there, if that makes any sense. I grew up on a website? That sounds absurd. But yeah, growing up, I spent a lot of time there, and that's where I learned how to take feedback and where I learned how to communicate ideas and to be able to also a lot of technical aspects as well. There's a lot of technical things that they'll help you solve there. But yeah, Twitter, ArtStation, polycount.com. There's probably a couple of others that are really good. Let me look through my bookmarks bar. I was going to say Tumblr, but nah. I follow a lot of great artists on Tumblr, but it's kind of been a little deadpan lately. Tumblr makes it very difficult to talk to people. That has this weird leaving a comment or a note. You can be creepy and message somebody, I guess, but I wouldn't really recommend that either. It's all right. That's a decent fourth option, I guess. But yeah, that could change. That could literally change next week. You never know. Twitter could just suddenly be found to violate the Constitution and get shut down. I don't know.
Well, those are good advices, and I also personally recommend Polycount because I've personally gotten some good feedback from there too. That community is just great. And
yeah,
going on to the next question, which is actually about you.
Uh-oh.
If anyone who can scroll through your work can see that you're very prolific in both 2D and 3D, has your skills in one area helped or affected your skills in the other? Is it like a kind of a balancing game?
I think in a lot of ways, getting better at 2D has helped me to improve my 3D designing abilities. It gives me better understanding of things like proportion and silhouette and structure and form, because in 3D it's really easy to get lost when it comes to silhouette, or because you always get really stuck on the surface planes and planar changes. But 3D has definitely helped my 2D as well. One of the biggest demands for concept artists is to be able to have a concept and understanding of 3D space, because the vast majority of concept art is going to be translated at some point into a 3D asset. And when an artist does not have a good understanding of 3D space and relationships and perspective and making sure that details line up in different views and angles, that can create immense problems. And because when you're a concept artist, your job is to solve problems. The last thing you want to do is create more problems. But yeah, I feel like the back and forth has helped a lot, but also lately a lot of concept artists have been using 3D and then painting over it. It's another tool. It's not cheating. The only thing that's cheating is stealing, and that's illegal. So, yeah, I mean, I think there is huge merit in learning both, besides the fact that it can help you to do one or the other better in very roundabout strange ways, but also because you never know when one of these skills could take you in an amazing different direction, or could very well be a deciding factor in you being able to get a job that you're looking at. I know that there's an old saying of a jack of all trades but a master of none, but that's only half of it. By the way, I saw this post on on Tumblr. So the other half is but better than a master of none. It's okay to specialize in more than one thing. It's okay to do more than one thing. And in fact, a lot of these things will feed into each other. Depending on the company that you want to apply for, or that you end up working for, or the industry that you get into, some industries love specialists who can only do one thing, but extremely well. But a lot of these places like people that can wear many hats, that can solve a lot of their problems and fill a lot of roles. And I feel like the specialist, at least in this day and age, especially when it comes to a lot of freelancing done on the internet, and just the demands and needs of what we do in the industry, and because of a lot of these tools have improved over the years, the specialist might be a bit of a dying breed. And don't quote me on that, because if I'm wrong, I don't want to be responsible. But it's good to have multiple skills. You don't necessarily need to say that you're good at baking and put that in your resume. That's not really going to be useful. That'll be useful after you get the job. But yeah, it's good to do both. I also dabble in music, which I haven't been able to use in anything, but it's also a hobby. It's okay to have hobbies besides art too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Really useful information there. So, what about those who would choose to more or less just take one trade or one skill and just get really, really good at that? Would you also recommend that as well, and not just always try to specialize in both? Because there are some people who typically like to stay in the field they're in. Typically, they're veterans. Like, once I met Noah Bradley, and I asked him if he was picking up ZBrush himself, because that's a very big thing going on with a lot of illustrators, and he said he just typically likes to stick to Photoshop and illustration. So do you think that's viable too?
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, ultimately, the kind of art that you do needs to be kind of the art that you like to do. And you gotta love it. So if the idea, and I'm sorry if I gave the wrong impression with what I said about doing both and how that's okay. I didn't mean to say that you have to learn both. You don't. You absolutely don't. That is not necessary. It's not required. It can be very helpful, especially if you want to solve different problems. But it's absolutely okay to specialize and to just do the kind of art that you like. If you just want to draw buff demons all day, do it. Because that's what makes you excited. That's what people are going to see when you put art out there that you love. It's so much better than saying to yourself, oh, well, I have to have a U.S. Marine in my portfolio to showcase that I can do that kind of thing. I'd rather be making an orc. But, just do the kind of art that you love. Do it the way that you love. Be open to other ways of doing it. But it's okay to stick to your guns. As long as it's working. But if you feel like you're not getting the results that you need, if you feel like your art just isn't really getting elevated to where you want to go with it, then maybe that's a good time to consider a different pipeline or a different approach to getting there.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Glad to hear that. And it's actually funny that you mentioned the word orcs, because this brings me to a fun question I have next. So,
oh yeah,
on your social media, you seem to very much like D&D or Dungeons and Dragons. which a lot of us here can relate to.
Yeah.
So how has that inspired your art or like contributed to helping you do what you do?
It Whenever I play D&D with other people and I look at the characters that they've made and I even try to draw them, it gets me out of my comfort zone and drawing types of characters, personalities that I might not otherwise be used to or even think of drawing. And I I love the absolutely asinine and absurd but wholly organic things that happen in D&D. The solutions that just come about and that the DM somehow allows can be incredibly inspiring for solving problems in your art. It's incredibly inspiring for just drawing your friends' characters. I I think things like D&D that are basically an exercise in collaborative creativity and storytelling are just beautiful. It's one of my favorite things, and I haven't played in like 3 months, and I've been getting antsy.
Okay, cool.
But yeah.
So, would you recommend a lot of people to play D&D to say improve their art skills or as like practice?
It's not necessary. Play D&D if you want to play it, but it's not for everybody. If fantasy is a bit of a turnoff for you, there are sci-fi like versions of it. There's things like Pathfinder. Uh, there's even a Call of Cthulhu version of it. But it's not necessary. But it's definitely a fun community, and the D&D community is chock full to the brim with artists. It's also a great way to meet people. You'll immediately share something in common besides, hey, I like to draw the art thing, just like you.
Okay, cool. I mainly asked that because we're all D&D. Well, most of us are D&D nerds, and was kind of hoping you'd say yes.
I'm happy to hear that.
Okay, but next question would be going back to the industry, the games industry. A lot of students, when they think about getting a job in the industry, they typically have head in the cloud, if I'm correct, and they think of, oh, I want to work on the big AAA titles. I want to work on Overwatch 2. I want to work on Halo 7. Do you think it's good to shoot for those kind of games or those kind of monster AAA productions, or would you recommend also starting small as well and seeing what's around the indie space? And if so, could you elaborate?
That's a really tough question to answer because everybody's journey is going to be different. I think ultimately it's important to have goals and dreams, but not to be so dead set on your artistic path or your career path going in a specific direction that any deviation from that results in disappointment or in you feeling down, because your career path is not going to go in the direction that you expected or wanted to. It never will, and it never does. And the more open that you are to that, I think the happier you'll be. You know, it's like Bob Ross says that there's no mistakes in art, there's only happy accidents. Well, maybe liver disease and pancreatitis is and is not a good thing to have, but just be open to whatever life throws your way and be open to new opportunities and things that maybe you didn't expect. Granted, don't be so open that you get taken advantage of. That's also an important aspect. You know, because there are a lot of starter companies or indie companies that, you know, from the outside in look really good, but it's difficult to gauge because a lot of these AAA companies have a track record and they have a history. And you know what to expect when you're going in. And you probably even already know artists that are working in these companies and they can vouch for it. And there is a lot of security in shooting for AAA because you know that if you get that job, you're probably not going to get screwed over. There's a lot more risk when it comes to the indie scene because you don't always know these people. But a lot of indie developers do have a track record, and they remain indie. So definitely be open to that as well. And if you have a Herculean will and you want to make your own game, do it. Even if it's just on the weekends. It might not be the most financially rewarding, at least not on your first couple of tries, but you never know. Might be the next Angry Birds or Minecraft.
That's
But
true.
yeah, I think it's okay to have a goal, and I understand why people want to shoot for AAA because of that security. But again, not everybody's journey is going to be the same. So just be open.
All right.
Yeah.
I also wanted to ask, what's the best way that you would recommend to balance one's personal life and one's professional life? Because we know they can be very demanding at times. Like, how do you balance the work you do at work and come home and find time for yourself and not just always have work on the brain?
I will say that having a job at a studio has given me structure. So when I come home, work is at work, and now I'm home, and I don't have to worry about work. That's marvelous. I love that because when I was freelancing, I didn't have that. I struggled a lot with freelancer's guilt, where I always felt like if I was at my computer, I had to be working. And I wasn't the very best at structuring my own time, which is why I destroyed my sleep schedule, which took its toll on my health. And that's when I decided it's probably not good to stay freelancing, at least for me. Um, that's a balance that I have not yet completely figured out. But if I can give you any advice, it's that you should always go to bed at a reasonable time. Don't waste daylight hours. And get up and take a break every now and then. Like, honestly, your wrists are an important asset. And if you abuse it and you don't take good care of it by taking breaks, stretching out your wrists, taking care of yourself, getting a little bit of exercise, it will impede your ability to make art. So please take care of yourself because when it does finally hit you, it might be too late in a lot of ways. So, yeah, that's a balance that I'm still figuring out, but ultimately, just take breaks and leave work at work. That way, when I come home, I don't really have any artistic obligations at home. I can pretty much do whatever I want. Occasionally, I do commissions, but for the most part, I just work on personal projects, and it's wonderful. It took me many years to be able to get to that point, though, to finish up all the artistic obligations that I had from freelance and commissions. And once I had all of those wrapped up, I've been able to completely free up my evenings and actually be able to have a social life and actually be able to spend time with family. So work towards it if you're not currently there. Try to tie up loose ends. Try to get things done and clear up your evenings so that you can do other stuff besides just art all the time.
Right. So a lot of that does go back to just the general principle of taking care of yourself as an artist, which, as we've said before, is never really discussed about much.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. I'm glad that people are talking about it now. And, it's important for, like, even in your class to, like, just talk about, hey, sometimes we experience burnout where, and that can last for months, in some cases, even years. But not a lot of people talk about that. I don't even know really the proper way to avoid it, but I'm glad that the discussion is happening. So this is a good time to be an artist, you guys. Especially before getting into the industry. You might be able to bypass having to learn all these hard lessons yourself. You might be able to learn from the experiences of other people. And I'm kind of jealous. I could have saved a couple of hospital bills. Oh no, it's fine. Pancreatitis kind of kicks your butt. But that's something that happened 2 years ago from freelancing and destroying my sleep schedule. And like I said, sleep will take its toll in kind of unexpected ways. You never expect not getting enough sleep at night to really affect your pancreas, but it does. So, yeah.
Definitely.
Take care of yourself, guys.
Keeping that one very high on the to-do list now.
Yeah, and oh, go ahead. Sorry,
No,
it sounded like somebody had a question.
no, they're just making fun of me because
Oh, okay.
other reasons.
Okay. So oftentimes you'll hear stories about people pulling all-nighters in the industry. Don't. The work's going to get done better and faster when you have enough sleep. Because when you're exhausted, you make mistakes. Then you have to fix those mistakes, which will cause you to make more mistakes. And eventually you're just going to get to the point that you're spinning wheels and accomplishing nothing. Crunch time in video games is an utterly unacceptable practice, and it's abusive, and it just doesn't pay out. And there is a lot of discussion about that lately. Luckily, I've never had to experience crunch, and if I did, it was a very short spurt. And because it was just a short spurt, it was productive. But these perpetual long crunch times and all-nighters and staying and working 80-hour weeks, guys, try to avoid that at all costs. Because you can only have so many hours of productive output a day. And anything beyond that is just hot gas.
Makes sense.
Because there is actually like you hear like there's so much like romanticism over like working like so like working super hard on projects and things like that. Because when you hear like when people like talk about how hard it was to make this game or to make this thing, they talk about how like hard it was to like do all-nighters like so many times. And I think like at some point like somewhere in the cultural zeitgeist it got into their heads that like if I want to make a really good game that will last forever, like or whatever or like a movie or whatever, like I have to be doing the same things, which is like working myself to the bone so that like and like even risking my health, when really the alternative was like work hard, but like that doesn't really mean like working hard is not the same as working yourself until like you literally can die.
Yeah, exactly. There is a lot of romanticisms about that, and I don't know when that became part of the suffering for your art portion of things. But it is definitely not a good practice. I had a really good point. It was at the tip of my tongue. Oh yeah, okay. So there, if you want a really good example of an incredibly prolific artist that has never worked excessive overtime his entire career, it's Glenn Keane. There's interviews with him. Yeah, there's interviews with him where he talked about where a lot of producers and other animators were like for us to get this done, we have to work all this overtime. And he's like, no, I'm going to go home. I'm going to spend time with my family. And when I come back, I will get the work done. And a lot of it comes down to being able to not just work hard, but to work smart and efficiently. Because if something that you're doing and you're planning for 40 hours and it ends up taking you 80 hours, there is an inefficiency with that pipeline, and it's time to look for more efficient and effective ways of doing it. So definitely a lot of this crunch time happens because of poor planning inefficiencies in your pipeline where you have to brute force manually do a lot of these tedious little things instead of automating that. And again, that romanticized attitude that this is me suffering for my art, this is my rite of passage. None of that is good. So it probably will happen to you in your artistic career. And I hope that it doesn't. Granted, there are far worse things that can happen in the industry than a little bit of crunch time. But yeah, just be aware that there is a diminishing return when it comes to that kind of thing. So take care of yourself. Make sure that other people are taking care of themselves too. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Again, so many people need to hear these things, and it's so good that people are very much speaking out about it. And one more thing people should also talk about more is access to opportunities. Because all over the internet we hear, just go to California, that's where all the jobs are. Just go to the West Coast. And people often head there and just walk in blind, and cities like California or New York can just chew you up and spit you back out. So I wanted
Yeah.
to ask the question about East Coast versus West Coast. Would you recommend moving out to California or up to a big a big hub city like New York or California or even Vancouver, Canada? And what opportunities can you find if you're not?
Ooh, this is something I don't really have a lot of experience with because I just moved to California in January. And it's really sunny, guys. It's so bright out here. Um, I don't really have a lot of good advice there. Because I do feel like that you can get a lot of access and opportunities through freelancing, but sometimes that freelancing never turns into anything more other than just more freelancing gigs. It doesn't necessarily mean that that might lead you to a studio job at a certain place. I think ultimately, though, California is so damn expensive, guys. And if you're moving there without a prospect for a job, that might be a death sentence. I know that some people have been able to make it, but that's probably because they already had connections within the industry, and to make themselves more appetizing to studios, they took care of the relocation themselves. Lucasfilm relocated me. They paid for all of that transition. They helped me to get here. They helped me to find a place. That's not going to be everybody's. That's not going to be everybody's journey. I've been incredibly lucky, remarkably lucky. This is a good question to ask on the internet and to put some feelers out. This would be a really great dialogue to start. I'd love to hear more perspectives about this, to get more opinions and hear more people's experiences with this kind of thing. Yeah, I got nothing. I'm sorry, man.
No, that's fine. At least it can open up more discussions in the future.
Yeah. On Vancouver, though, there is one advantage. They have actual labor laws and universal health care, so that might be a good one.
Keeping that in mind.
Yeah.
Okay. Now about applying for jobs. What would you recommend the layout for a portfolio be? Because this seems to be another question that everybody's asking, but and everybody's answering, but there doesn't seem to be a single or even like summarized answer to it. It always seems that there are many different answers, and people never really know how many pieces to put in a portfolio, or what to put in a portfolio, or how they should make their portfolio. So, how would you
Yeah.
answer this?
Tough question because if you go to my art station right now, my portfolio is a mess. But that's just because ArtStation, in addition to being a portfolio, is also social media, and I don't know how the hell that works. It becomes really messy. But as far as structure is, if you can't get your own site, I highly suggest building a portfolio on ArtStation because everybody knows how to navigate it. It is universal at this point. Nobody's going to get lost on your site. They're going to know where to find your resume. They're going to know where to find your art. And if they want to learn more, they'll be able to find it. They'll be able to see your best art. And if they want to see more, then they can see more. I don't know how to make my own website. I did not do well in my web design class. I got like a C. But in terms of structuring portfolios, it's really hard to tell what people really want to see. But there are a couple of things that I know that they don't want to see. And what they don't want to see is just everything that you've ever done. They don't want to see your stream of conscience. They don't want to see a bunch of sketches that you've made, you know, off and on through the weeks, unless it's like some of your best stuff in one particular post. Twitter is great for that because Twitter is not a portfolio. And it's okay for there to be a difference between the two. You can post a crap ton of stuff on Tumblr and Twitter, and if anybody's even still on Facebook at this point, hell, even DeviantArt is probably better than Facebook. But ArtStation allows you to categorize stuff and group it together and make folders, and that's awesome. And if you pay for a subscription, it'll even let you make a site. So, yeah, do that. In terms of presentation, just try to make things look like you know what you're doing. You know, that you've explored options whenever you're doing concept art, more than one. It doesn't need to be 100. That's excessive and also probably pointless. But definitely show that you've explored options, that you can solve problems. And what I mean by that is you can draw things from different angles. You can show a couple of kind of more macro options. Show that if you're doing 3D art, show that you know what you're doing, that you have good polyflow. If you're doing characters, make sure that, you know, that elbow can actually bend without looking like a weird warped meat sausage. You don't have to be a good rigger, just try it out. Make sure that the topology is actually going to work okay for that. Unless you're an animator, don't do a demo reel. Nobody really has any use for that. Besides the fact that not everybody's going to share your love for, I don't know, AC/DC or the Spice Girls. The trouble with it is that it is a set start and end, and it's difficult for the person viewing that to be able to take in what it is that you've made at their own pace, to really be able to get a close, good look, because most demo reels are at max 720p or 1080p, and them just having to pause to really get a close look at stuff, it's going to be compressed, it's going to be broken, it's going to be garbled. There's just no way for anybody who's looking at your portfolio to get a good idea, like a really good idea of what it is that you can do as an artist, whether 2D or 3D, with a demo reel. But if you are an animator, you have to have a demo reel. Just it's different for every discipline. It could even differ depending on the company that you're applying to. Some companies like to see character art right next to environment art. Some companies only want to see specifically realistic environment art or stylized characters. So when you do apply to these different companies, try to tailor at least a folder of your portfolio specifically to what they need to see that's relevant to what you're applying for. Again, and this is a really great note that Gavin Goulding made from Insomniac, is just try to keep the work in your portfolio relevant to who you're applying to. And you can change your portfolio at the drop of a hat. You can mix it around. After you've applied to one place and you're applying to another, you can change it again, make a section specifically for them. It's okay. You can have more than one portfolio. Um, but yeah, just try to keep it organized, and ArtStation's really good because you don't have to know CSS.
Great.
Yeah, that's the best I got. Sorry.
No, that's great. Actually, sorry for the silence there.
No, it's fine. I kind of started ranting. I apologize.
That's completely fine. Honestly, a lot of the questions I've had planned out, you've answered just while
Oh,
talking.
good.
So, thanks a lot. One question I'm very interested in is, since you do work at ILMX Lab, especially after the your studio's presentation at GDC showing the real-time ray tracing, it really shows that we're in the midst of the game industry evolving. So, where
Yeah.
do you personally think the industry will be in let's say, 3 to 5 years? Like, what do you think the state
Three
of
to-
the games will be like?
3 to 5 years, I know they'll look a heck of a lot nicer. I think VR will have a much more solid foothold. VR is not looking to replace anything. It's not going to be the new way to play video games. It'll be like the difference between going to a theater and watching television. They're not competing with each other. It's going to be a totally different medium. Also because you can't really port games over to VR without creating a vomit comment. I also see potentially a lot more crossover between film and video games, especially with real-time rendering technology. My hope is that more animated television shows will start using real-time engines to create their films or their series. I think that would be great, especially if they can find an artistic style that ages okay. Maybe hopefully better than Reboot or Roughnecks back in the 90s. But I think in terms of games themselves specifically, we're going to see much more realistic people, much more believable characters. We're probably going to see a lot more emphasis on emotive, character-driven storytelling. Because these tools are getting better, it's easier for more people to have access to things like facial motion capture, even the tools on engine side, as well as third-party plugins and equipment that you can actually afford as a regular person and not a gigantic corporation with billions of dollars. And because this accessibility is getting better and better, and more people are going to be able to get into it, we might have a lot of noise in a lot of cases, but we're going to see, I hope, video games that are just going to take a totally different direction and tell stories or even scenarios just better than we have. That's been the case pretty much every generation. You know, you compare Metal Gear Solid on the PlayStation to, say, Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands, and they definitely share a lot of mechanical similarities. And Ghost Recon Wildlands is definitely in some cases a derivative of Metal Gear Solid, but it is a fun experience. And we're just going to keep seeing evolution upon evolution, people iterating and expanding on ideas, just like it always has. But we'll probably also see some really weird shit, and I look forward to that too. Yeah, in terms of technology, it's just going to look nicer. I don't really know what else to say other than just more crossover between film and games, which is going to be great.
Right, and that actually answers the next question I was going to ask, which is, what exactly are you personally looking forward to in the art industry?
Yeah, definitely. I want to see more crossover between film and games. I want to see feature-length films rendered in real-time engines, because offline rendering is just incredibly expensive and time-consuming, and it impacts the entire pipeline of making an animated film. Everything has to revolve around this immovable monolith, and your entire ritual within developing this stuff is built around that. Hang on. Yeah. So I think as this technology is going in a completely different direction, pipelines are going to change. Things are going to become more accessible. And I just think that's awesome. So that means that all of you have access to it. You'll be able to more fully realize the stuff that you want to make. And it's not going to cost you a fortune, hopefully.
Oh, that's great. I'm looking forward to all of that too. And that's all the questions that I personally have. We have about 30 minutes left. Do we want to open up to Q&A? All right. So, if you have a question, come on up to the mic and ask Mr. Ben.
Hey.
Hi.
I have a question more about like the portfolio stuff again. So would you recommend to like contact studios with your portfolio and like resume, or like just asking if they have any positions open, or if they're interested in taking like another artist or something, or like an intern?
I don't know. I've never actually done that myself. I think I've seen this question answered before. And typically the answer is maybe? That's not very helpful, and I'll tell you why, because a lot of these postings are posted internally at the studio first. They'll try to hire within their different departments before they publicly post these things. Sometimes, if you know an artist friend who works at said game company, they'll definitely have a good idea of, hey, you know, right around the bend, we're probably going to have a job posting for a position that I think you'd be perfect for. So when that comes out, you'll have a little bit of a head start. But I wouldn't recommend asking, I wouldn't really recommend asking like the hirers, because they're going to give only what they can really give you. But again, maybe that's not even a correct answer. This is definitely a good question to ask the nebulous hive mind of the internet. But my answer is, from my experience, it's just been good to ask other artists, like, hey, do you guys know of any jobs in any industries or companies that either you work for or you know about? Because I'm looking for a job at this time. And typically you're going to get some hits. And that's not a bad question to go out and ask. As far as like actual recruiters and HR, maybe add them on LinkedIn, see what their connections are. Just try not to be creepy about it. It's really, really difficult to actually quantify what is creepy behavior when you're job hunting on the internet. But I hope that kind of answered your question. Like even though they don't have a public posting of a job, you never know. They might say, hey, we have something coming up. No harm done, really. Doesn't hurt anybody.
Thank you.
Yeah. No problem.
Where's the camera? Okay. Hello. So,
Hey.
I always hate everything in my portfolio that's more than, say, a month old. And I'm always feeling like
Understandable.
it's that next thing that I'm making right now. That's going to be the thing that I'm going to apply to a job with. How do you deal with that?
You get used to it. It's definitely okay, and probably quite normal to look at old art and think, wow, I really hate this, but I can do better. That's actually probably going to be the driving force to keep you always on your toes and always humble and always improving. That's not bad, but that would be when you ask other people for feedback. Say, hey, what do you think my strongest pieces are? What do you think I should put in my portfolio? What of what I currently have in here should I take out? Do you think this particular piece could use a little bit of tweaking and revisement to bring it up to a higher level, or if it's just not worth it? Always ask for very specific feedback from your peers, because we often just get lost in looking at all of our world this close. It's good to take a step back and get more perspectives. As far as dealing with that personally, well, it sucks, but I hope it never goes away. It's important to have that. if that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
No problem.
Here I come. I'm gonna grab the chair so you don't have to. On my way.
Hi. So, I've heard that when you're trying to establish a social media presence, branding yourself is really important. And I don't think I completely understand. Because, like, you were saying before, don't post about how you, like, hate everything because that could affect your job in the long run. But also, I love doing hate rants. That's, like, you know what I mean? So, I guess, what is the balance between presenting yourself professionally and not watering yourself down, I guess, is my question.
So you can still definitely be enthusiastic and passionate on main. That's okay. Maybe if you want to shit talk somebody, put that on like a personal account, not your main one. Mostly because when it comes to feedback that other people see, whether it's directed at them or not, positive things really give people a much better impression. It's okay to rant about a problem that needs to be addressed, but if it's just general pettiness or shit talking, it's okay to vent that, but maybe do it in personal circles and on a personal one. As far as branding goes, I don't really know what a brand is when it comes to a human being. People tell me that I have a brand. It's mostly just because I haven't changed my avatar for 8 years. And I stuck with the same alias that I made when I was 12, which is why it's so edgy. And I've come to appreciate that in my own way. But I just generally try to this is maybe even just a good thing in general, is try to be positive. If there's a good role model when it comes to this thing, Thumper from Bambi. If you can't say something nice, don't say nothing at all. Granted, that is not helpful when there are actual problems that need to be addressed, of course. But it's going to be tough to strike that balance. I usually talk with peers before I post about something publicly. I'll talk to them and complain and rant to them first. And if it feels like I feel like this needs to be talked about more, then I might go public with it. But I don't think I've done a Twitter rant for a while. The last Twitter rant I did was about the misnomer of what computer generated means and how often people misinterpret what that is. And that's a good rant, I think. Maybe I'm just saying that because it's my rant. That's not necessarily true. But if your rant is directed at a specific individual, that's maybe not necessarily healthy. And you can do that within your circles, but putting that out there, that can alienate people who aren't even directly associated or involved with that person, if that makes sense. Yeah. Just try to be positive. Absolutely gush over other people's work. Say that this art is so beautiful and good that it makes me furious. You can say that. That's okay. But yeah, if somebody did something within your social life, or Facebook's recent policies, maybe that's a good one to rant about publicly. But yeah, just personal stuff, try to find a balance. Facebook's probably better for that kind of thing. Yeah. That's definitely a tough question to answer, because everybody's got a different way about doing it. And you'll see people who are seasoned veterans who will totally shit talk other people on the internet, and that's always kind of weird to see. But it seems to work for them. I don't know. I hope that was at least slightly helpful.
It was, thank you.
Okay.
I have a question. So you mentioned earlier that like universal Lego block, the trim sheet, Is that what it was?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I also love architecture and stuff like that, where can I find something like that to play with?
Okay. So you might want to make your own, and they're not hard to make. But a really, really good GDC talk to look at is, I think it's from 2015 or 2016. It's Sunset Overdrive's Ultimate Trims. And one of the selling points they have on that, because it's especially for video games, is that every one of their trims has a 45-degree bevel in the normal map, which means that when they snap two 90-degree pieces together, it has this beautiful faked bevel, and it looks like it was high poly, and it eliminates those hard edges and aliasing that you get from the impossibly sharp edges that you get from low poly models. It's a weird thing, but things like edges are really important to me. Edge control is, of course, a very important thing when it comes to 2D art, but it definitely carries over in 3D. So trim sheets really help with you being able to manage that. In addition to that, a good search term would be trim sheet texture. Because I know when you just search trim sheet, you're going to get like Excel spreadsheets, and that's not very helpful. But texture will nail it down a lot better.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, man.
I guess going back to a sort of modular approach and snapping things together, when designing modular pieces for environments, what's kind of the workflow for that, just in general, especially if you want to get them to snap coordinate and degrees wise, so they'll fit together nicely?
So, for the most part, stick to the grid, and they'll always snap together. Sometimes your textures might not align, so you definitely want to keep that in mind. If you want to solve that issue with maybe like a world space projected texture, that's a good solution. Or just be very mindful of your UVs. That's probably a better solution and a lot cheaper. But yeah, just keep everything to the grid, really. And this grid can be base anything. It can be like traditional games where it's base 8, like 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, that kind of thing. But more recently, at least when it comes to kind of more human proportioned architectural things, with the new generation, we've been using a base 10 grid system. And that's just basically 1, 5, 10, 0.5, 20, 50, that kind of thing. But keep it to the grid. So if you have, like, say, a wall that in the real world is... Also try to keep to centimeters, by the way. Inches are garbage. And you'll have an awful time importing that stuff into any engine because nobody uses Imperial. It's a terrible system. But let's say that you have a wall that in the real world is proportioned to be like 38.4 centimeters. Well, to make that snap to the grid, round it up to 40. Nobody's going to notice. And you're going to have a much easier time. Your level designers will love you. You will pat yourself on the back. And everything's just going to be able to snap together in the expected ways, but also in the totally unexpected ways. And you'll be able to have a lot more usability out of your assets. So yeah, keep it to the grid.
I don't know if this was asked before, but how do you fend off imposter syndrome? Sorry to be depressing, but I don't know if
No.
it was
Good question. I don't think you do. I don't think that feeling ever goes away. And I don't mean to to depress you. There's a lot of artists that I look up to and admire, and when I saw that they suffer from it too, it was very humanizing. This is a very normal thing that everybody seems to struggle with. I will say that in some cases, besides a lot of emotional distress, it can keep you from getting a hot head, which is important. You don't want to become so sure of yourself that you're blind to your own shortcomings or inadequacies, right? But like staying humble is going to be a lot more important than having surefire confidence in everything that you do. Because at least when you're humble, or to some cases second guessing yourself, you're not going to make an ass out of yourself, and you're not going to overstretch, take too much on, and then actually bring the fears of all of those doubts that you had from imposter syndrome and make a reality out of it, if that makes sense. So I don't really know how to combat it other than just talk to people, let them know, hey, I'm kind of feeling down, could use some feedback on my work. Don't necessarily fish for compliments, but always try to improve. And as you see progress in your own work, you'll feel more natural confidence, and you'll be able to combat it, I think, a little bit easier. But ultimately, I don't think those feelings ever go away. And I'm sorry that there's no cure. But yeah, that's the best I've got. That's still something that I struggle with. The fact that I'm doing this interview with you guys is surreal. That I'd be put in this position right now. And, you know, maybe someday you'll be in a similar position and it's still going to be there in the back of your head. And you're going to feel like, I thought things would be different. I thought I would feel different, but you won't. You'll always be you. Maybe that's a good thing.
Okay, and then lastly, I feel like I'm in a bit of a freelancer trap right now. How do you make the jump from freelancing to studio work? And are there any challenges that I should prepare for in making the jump from working at home on my own to working with a bunch of other people?
So definitely it's important to know how to collaborate, because you're going to do a heck of a lot more of that at a studio job, because you're literally sitting right by the person. You don't have to send them a message or wait for an email or wait for the clients to wake up because they're on the other side of the world. Things will be a lot faster in that regard, but also you're going to be treated a little bit better because you're in the studio environment. You have people who take care of all of your planning. Be nice to your line producers. Always appreciate the work that they do, because you wouldn't get anything done without them. And you probably already have to plan all of your stuff currently. You know that's awful. You have to manage your own time, and some people make it work. I know that I didn't. What made me do the jump from doing freelance to studio work was a health crisis, where I made the realization that I am not capable of responsibly managing my own time and sleep, and that's when I had to make the jump. But I think if you're able to be self-motivated enough to be successful at freelancing, that's going to be a good skill to take into a studio. Ultimately, just be open to the fact that you're going to be talking to a lot of people. Some people will be loud. Wear headphones. And just be prepared to have a lot of very rapid back and forth with people. And you'll be fine. Yeah, that's about it.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
So, I have a question more on like back bouncing off of the self-motivation things. Like, do you have any advice on like how to stay motivated to like practice and like get studies done, like trying to improve, like especially like as a student, like we have that huge summer break gap, and like normally during those times I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do so much stuff, and then I just lay in bed for all 3 months. Like, do you have any advice on how to like just keep at least something going?
I think before I answer that question, I will say that it's okay to take a break, definitely. Because it sounds to me like you were experiencing some burnout. You're still absolutely effective, and you make a lot of progress, and you're very prolific during your school year. So maybe that break isn't bad. But in terms of keeping motivation, it's not something that can just come to you. It's something that you have to cultivate, almost like you're farming it. So you need to have a bit of structure in that respect of always trying to look for things that are cool, things that are beautiful to you. Look for beauty in the mundane, look for beauty on the internet, which is sometimes a weird adventure. Just try to how do I answer this? Because a lot of people are naturally self-motivated, and that is a God-given gift that I am immensely jealous of. I have to have a little bit of structure that I put in place that I'm going to at least do something creative once a day. And whether that's me just messing around in Substance Designer or drawing something, and this is besides work, but it's a lot easier to, once you have momentum built up, to keep it going, even if it's at a slow pace, than to let it come to a complete halt and have to start it again. Getting it started again can be really, really brutal. And that's usually because you're coming out of burnout. Burnout is a really serious thing. It's mental exhaustion. It's when you've been pushing too hard. So I think the other half of staying motivated is just making sure that you don't burn yourself out. To take breaks, to take a step back every now and then, to pace yourself. Because I know that we see a lot of these incredibly prolific artists. You go to ArtStation, you see gigabytes of masterpieces. And that can give us a very skewed perspective, because if you were to take any one of those artists and look at their output, it's significantly a lot less than what you would initially expect, just because you're seeing a crap ton of art all at once. You're seeing their entire body of work. But really, realistically, most of these people are maybe doing a couple of sketches here and there, maybe progressively working every day on a particular painting, putting a little bit of work into a project that they've been doing every day. They don't post their progress every day. Sometimes it might even take them a while to finish. But it's important to stay motivated with having the perspective that if you push too hard, you might fall apart. So take care of yourself. It's a lot easier to keep it going just a little bit at a time than to burn all of your fuel and completely stop the machine all at once.
That was very
So
helpful.
hopefully that's, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Also, if you have like weird interests, like say, I really like this specific species of bird because they look like a really weird ass goofball, just dive deeper into that. And the reason why is because it's something that you specifically have an interest in. And if you can tie that into your artistic ventures, that's awesome, because that's going to generate new ideas. That's going to help you to have a bunch of artistic output, yes, but also to be able to explore different perspectives and ideas and solve different problems that you'd never thought of before. So definitely let your weird interests and your strange hobbies tie back into your artistic life. If anything, they should be one and the same, and I hope that they are. It's okay to post those weird things on your main Twitter, because every time I rant about how I love trim sheets on Twitter, people can feel that enthusiasm, and that keeps me going.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Would you say that like that very long that answer would also apply to times when you just like when you have a different flavor of burnout, where it's not just like you feel like you can't create anything, it's more like everything you do, everything you create, like you look at it and you're like, I'm not happy with this, or like I don't like this, or like or alternatively in a similar note, like you're stuck doing something that you're not really necessarily the most enthused about.
Yeah, those are two definitely different questions. I'll try to answer both of them. The first one being that the flavor of burnout that you're experiencing. Could you actually repeat that first part again? Just want to make sure.
Like if you're looking at, if you're making work, and then you look at it and you're like, I really am not satisfied, or like I even hate this stuff.
Yeah, so basically, like it's a classic ordeal of I have this beautiful picture in my head, but my stupid hands just can't make it real. That means that you're about to level up, probably. That means that your artistic perspective, right? Your own artistic taste has leveled up past your artistic ability. And now you're just getting to the point to where you're building your ability back up to match your taste. That's not bad. Sometimes you'll surprise yourself, like, how in the hell did I draw something that good? Like, it feels like it's way past your own normal artistic ability. That'll be rare, but it's okay. You're always going to be playing the catch-up game. Taste, ability. Taste, ability. And that is inherently the artistic struggle. That's what all of us have to deal with pretty much on a daily basis. And it sucks, but it's also kind of exciting. But if you feel like you haven't gotten that level up in a long time, like it's been forever since you've been able to catch up your artistic ability with, you know, your taste, your expectations, artistically your own perspective, I don't really know. I'd say just keep going. You'll eventually get there, but if what your methods are, and if your methods are currently not getting you the results, try to mix it up, or just try something completely different and then come back to it. Let it cook in the back of your head for a bit. Yeah, just keep going at it. It's going to eventually break. You're eventually going to keep up. And it's also okay to take a break for a bit. Don't kill yourself about it just because, I feel like everything that I'm drawing is awful and I feel like I never want to draw again. Like, don't get to the point that you feel like you want to completely forfeit your entire artistic career because you can never get there. Trust me, your art does have value. It is good, and you're only going to get better. It's okay. Whenever you're working on stuff that you're not enthusiastic about, it's really hard to find that enthusiasm. But if you can find one particular aspect about what it is that you like a little bit more than other things, it's okay to maybe focus on and develop that in particular. Say that maybe you're drawing just a bunch of regular portraits for people, and maybe that doesn't really have you very enthusiastic, but if you can focus on things like, I really like this shape on the eyelid that it makes at certain angles, or I really love drawing the shading on the nose here in the corners, or underneath the ears, or underneath the chins. Just try to find more macro things that you can be enthusiastic about. And that, I think, will help you to elevate the results of that art to a higher level. And that might even make you more enthusiastic about what maybe you weren't really too excited about initially. I don't know if that made any sense, but I'm hoping that it does. Just to recap, maybe overall what you're doing isn't too exciting, but you can find smaller little things that you can be excited about within that you can focus on, and hopefully it'll help you to elevate everything to a higher level. Does that make sense, or did I just make you more confused?
No, that made complete sense. Thank you so much.
Good. No problem.
Any room for the last question? Or should I- Okay. There's one final question I want to ask before we wrap this up.
Yeah.
So, before, you had given a piece of advice that said, just go to communities, reach out, and talk to people. That's a good way to get yourself out there, get your name in people's minds, and get your work in front of people. But a lot of us have, I guess you can call it anxiety or fear or stress or whatever about getting ourselves in front of, like, the big people or just trying to make an impression on them. either we don't know how to or we just don't have the confidence to. Would you have any advice on just trying to talk to people like that? Like people who you really look up to and but are like too scared to try to speak to online?
Yeah. I think the first bit of advice is the worst thing that can happen is that they just won't respond, and that's okay. Really, that is truly the worst thing that can happen. And there could be a myriad of ways why that happens. Either they saw it, meant to reply, but it was a bad time, and then they forgot about it, or maybe they just didn't see it. In some cases, maybe they just don't know what to say. But ultimately, when you have these people that you look up to, that you've admired for years, maybe even your whole life, try to realize that they're just normal people, that on top of having normal people boundaries, they also have normal people struggles. And if you go into the situation of asking them and treating them like a normal person, like, hey, I had a question about such and such, or hey, I was hoping maybe you could give me some advice, they're definitely going to respond well to that. When you maybe flower up your language and kind of put them on a pedestal, that's going to bleed into what you're saying, and that's going to really make them feel weird. I think there's this old saying, don't meet your heroes, meet your heroes. Because you'll see that they are just like you, just maybe a bit older. And that's an incredibly comforting thing. It's going to help. For me, it really helps to lower down a lot of that anxiety, because if you can imagine where I work, I meet a lot of people that I've admired pretty much my whole life, and they're just chill. They're just regular people. So if you can, in approaching that situation with your anxiety, just try to remember that they're normal people and treat them like that, you're going to have a much easier time, and you're probably going to get much better feedback from them, a better response in general. And also, it's just in general good to comment on their work, like, hey, I really like this, great work. I've seen a lot of people get connections just from them giving compliments, like letting it be known that, hey, I love this piece because, and that will definitely put you into their mind. That'll help your name to be seen. People are going to see these comments. Also, it's just a damn nice thing to do, because everybody likes hearing good things about their art. I know you guys do. I know I do. Do it for somebody else. And that'll definitely really help to break the ice. But a very important thing is, because they're people and they're individuals, if they don't want to connect for whatever reason, don't take it personally and don't force it. It's okay. Just like with you, how walking around campus at any given moment, nobody's obligated. You're not obligated to be anybody's friend for whatever reason. That is your decision to make if you want to reciprocate that. That's the same on the internet. And I know that maybe that seems obvious, but that's something that I've definitely screwed up on before. So hopefully that's helpful.
It's super helpful, trust me, because that's kind of how I went through even getting you to speak. So thank you so much. And with that,
no problem, man. Thank you.
And with that, I think we're pretty much done. Ben Hale, everybody, if you have any last closing words you'd like to tell us.
Oh gosh, I'm not prepared for this.
That's okay if you don't.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I'm incredibly flattered. Just remarkably flattered. I'm sorry if I ranted so much. Oh my gosh, I just wouldn't shut up. But thanks guys for having me. I really appreciate it. And feel free to chat me up on Twitter anytime if you have any further questions. It's fine. I like Twitter. I have basically uninstalled Facebook on my phone at this point. So that's definitely the best avenue to get a hold of me. Email is a mess, and it's a good thing that I did see your email at the time, because my gosh, there was a lot of stuff going on at that time. But yeah, thank you guys.
All right, and thank you for speaking to us. And with that, we hope you have a good rest of your Friday and an even better every other day.
Yeah. Thanks, dude.
No problem. Take
Bye,
care.
guys.
Bye.